Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to the EduSat Network. Our topic of discussion is part of our series on international relations, and today is the second lecture where we shall discuss the theories of international relations with special emphasis upon realism. And for this very discussion we have with us in our studio our subject expert Dr. Rajan Kumar.
Thank you.
Assistant Professor, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He has been teaching for nearly a decade. And with this, I welcome sir and I request him to begin our today's lecture. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Urvachi. And in the lecture that we have started a new series of lectures, and you might have viewed the last lecture, which was on understanding international relations. So in that series, we go to the next step today, and today we'll be talking about theories of international politics. Because yesterday I explained you that how international relations can be understood, and I gave you a broad overview of international relations, the way it emerged as a subject, and what are the issue areas that are covered in international relations or in international politics that we discussed in the previous lecture. Now we go further into the understanding international politics. So to understand international politics, there are various theories in international politics. And briefly we discussed in the previous lecture, we talked a little bit about realism, liberalism, constructivism, critical theory and all of that. And today my focus would be on realism. Then again in the lectures to come we'll discuss about liberalism, maybe critical theory, constructivism. But today's focus would be realism. But before I start what realism is, or who are the theoreticians of realism, or what are the basic elements or basic arguments of realist scholars. These things I'll discuss in today's lecture, but I'll start with understanding a theory. For instance, when you say a theory, or as I say theory of international politics, so what do you mean by theory? How do you understand theory? What is the meaning of that? Defining theory is very difficult, so I'll tell you that what are the basic constituents, or what are the basic elements of any theory. For instance, you might have heard of theories like, in science you have theories of Newton. You might have heard Newton's theory of gravity, or Einstein later you might have heard the theory of relativity of Einstein. Similarly, in social sciences you have Marxist theories, you have liberal theories, you have various other theories. You might have heard Lenin's theory of imperialism. Then there are various theories on state by various scholars. For instance, like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. You might have heard of these scholars who have given this theories of state. Machiavelli has given a theory of state. So similarly, there are other scholars who try to understand international politics through various theories, and the realism that we'll discuss today is a part of that group. So the important thing to understand before we proceed into realism, that what a theory is. Please understand there are several elements of a theory. Every theory, invariably, if you talk of any theory, whether this is theories of natural sciences or social sciences, there are certain elements of theories. There are certain elements which are common in all the theories. For instance, the basic purpose of any theory is to explain that there are certain events that you need to explain. For instance, the French Revolution. You need to explain that French Revolution. So what do? You probably take the help of a theory. The theory is given by some scholars, or theories, or you can construct your own theory. So basically, the first major purpose of any theory is to explain. You explain in terms of what are the causes and what are the effects. If I explain you in terms of methods, so theory basically it tries to correlate or establish the causation, to correlate the causes and the effect, or correlate the independent variable, which are the causes, and the dependent variable, which are the effects. So the basic purpose of any theory is to explain. For instance, if I give you a theory of, say, international politics, say I give you a theory of realism today. So when Morgenthau tells you that politics is nothing but a struggle for power. So basically, he is trying to explain power he's trying to explain politics the way the struggle of power leads to politics. So every politics is nothing but a struggle of power. Similarly, in international relations, you might have heard the theory which is very popular, the liberal theory, which is known as this democratic peace theory, which tells you that democracies do not fight. The countries which are democratic, they do not fight among themselves. So basically, the purpose of that theory is to explain that what are the reasons that democratic states do not fight, or what are the factors that lead to the absence of war in a democratic setup. So coming back to the theory, the basic purpose of any theory is to explain. So explanation is the first important element of any theory, explaining in terms of the causes to explain the effects of a certain event. So that's the first part of any theory. Second, theories also try to predict. Every theory, for instance, when somebody gives a theory of, say, democracies do not fight, there he's trying to explain that why, since the democratic states have not fought in the past, so democratic states will also not fight in the future. It's likely that the democratic states will not fight in the future. So there, the basic purpose, again, as you can see, is to not just explain the events of the past, but it also to explain since that has happened in the past, so if the circumstances are similar, if the causes are similar, the events will also be similar. So basically to explain the future events also, right? The likelihood that if the causes are similar, the event would be similar. So that is again a kind of prediction, and prediction is possible because every theory is based on a broader generalization. Theory is never given just on base of one case. You cannot say that I have studied the case of poverty in India and you have given a theory of poverty for the entire universe. No, that's not the case. When you're trying to give a theory, generalization is very important. For instance, if you're trying to give a theory of say poverty, you should not be taking just one particular case of India. You'll be taking a number of cases throughout the world. So you have to pick up a large number of cases, not only from South Asia but also from other countries like Latin America or Africa or European states or Southeast Asia. So you pick up a number of cases and then you try to compare and then you try to generalize. So the theory, basically, theory, one of the major elements of theory is to generalize. So and this, because of the generalization, the application of theory is universal in nature. So theories are not confined to one particular time or one particular space. You cannot say that I have given a theory of democracy, but my theory of democracy applies only to United States, and that too in the 19th century. No, theories are given. Theories are universal in nature, and they are also for a longer period of time. Please understand that theories are not fixed. Theories keep changing, but the application of theory, the best of the theories are by nature universal in nature. So they apply to all the cases. When, say for instance, the people who gave the theory of democracies do not fight, they did not say that and this theory, in fact, this is a liberal theory of international politics, and that was given by a famous scholar, Michael Doyle. So Michael Doyle, in that case, did not say that my theory of democracies not fighting applies only to United States or Israel or just the European states. No, he says that wherever you have the democracies, it's very unlikely that the democracies will fight among themselves, right? So what I'm trying to explain you through this is that theories have universal application, right? So it's not just one particular case. It's not applicable for just one particular case, but it applies to all the similar cases in the world. So if you give for instance, when Hobbes is trying to define the human nature as nasty, poor, brutish, short, etc. So he is saying for all the human beings in the universe. He is not just talking about the human beings of Britain. He is talking about according to him, the human nature is same throughout the world. So basic assumptions of any theory, as you can see, the basic assumption is by and large universal in nature. It's not fixed to just one particular case or just a small region, for instance. So theories have universal applications. In fact, best of the theories have universal applications. This is not to say that some of the theories are not regional in nature. For instance, it is possible that some of the theories could be specific to a certain condition or situation. Say, for instance, if you are trying to give a theory of the caste system that you have in India, so that theory can be applied only to this Indian subcontinent where this system of caste prevails. But in that situation, when you're giving a theory of caste, so caste system that applies to the universe for caste is all the places where it exists, right? So in that case, it has the universe of caste system is the Indian subcontinent primarily, where it exists in various forms. But beyond that, there are also certain theories which are given by, for instance, Merton, which theories which are known as middle range theories, which apply to certain particular region. But by and large, I come back to the same point that by and large, the best of the theories in science or social sciences, best of the theories have universal applications. So that you have to keep in mind. So I'll repeat what I've said. What are the basic elements of a theory? One, I said explanation, that is very important. Second, I said generalization, which is again very important. Third, I said prediction, which is again important. And universal application. Fourth, that I said is an important element of any theory. And the fifth, which is again very important for any theory, is the concept of falsifiability. That every theory has to be falsifiable. Falsifiability, there is a difference between falsifiability and being false. So when I'm saying that every theory should be falsifiable, I do not say that a theory is actually false. No, that's not the case. The case here is that when you're trying to give a theory, or when a theoretician tries to give a theory, you have to leave the space for falsification. Which means that you cannot say that my theory is true forever. What you say that I've given a theory, but if there are certain evidences which might emerge as contrary to the theory that you have given, so in that case your theory will stand falsified. Your theory will be falsified, and that is what I mean by the concept of falsifiability. And this concept was given by the famous philosopher Karl Popper, and he said that every theory, or in fact he talked about the knowledge, but it applies to theory as well. So a theory should be falsifiable. That every theory you have to construct a theory in a way which leaves the space that in case there are certain evidences which are contrary to the theory, then you have to modify or reject the theory. So that is what I mean by falsifiability. And that is also one thing which differentiates a theory from the metaphysics. In metaphysics, there can be concepts which are not falsifiable, which cannot be falsified. But falsifiability in this case, what it means that if you have given a theory, and if there are, because theory contains two important parts. One is the logic, and the second is the empirics. So if there are certain empirical evidences which defy the logic, so in that case you have to reject the theory, or you have to probably modify the theory. So falsifiability is an important aspect of any theory, and that you have to keep in mind. So broadly, you can understand theory with the parameters that I've given you. It has to explain. It has to explain in a very parsimonious way. It has to generalize. It has to be based on generalization. Third, it has some kind of relevance for the future understanding, because something has happened in the past, so this will happen. Similar things will create similar situations in future as well. So prediction is an important aspect of any theory. Fourth, universal application, I said, and fifth, finally, falsifiability. So these are the broader elements of any theory, and with this parameter you can test any theory, and all the theories will fall into will actually have all these elements in its application. So with this, I now move to the theories of international politics, the various theories which try to explain or understand international politics. Some of the theories will focus on the power, the hierarchy in the international system. Some of the theories will focus on identity, norms, etc. There are some of the theories which focus on the complex interdependence between the two states, the way the states cooperate. Some of the theories focus on international organization, but there can be some of the theories which are focusing just on the specific issue areas of international politics. So they try to there are various theories in international politics, and they try to focus on the various aspects of international politics. As I told you that I'll be talking about various theories in the coming lectures, but today my focus would be this on realism. So what are the first, briefly, what are the existing theories of international politics? Just to reiterate what I said already earlier, the first is liberalism, which emerged, in during the First World War period and in the 1920s. So that was the first phase of liberalism. But liberalism also traces its origin to Immanuel Kant, who wrote this pamphlet called Perpetual Peace, and he basically argued that how democratic states, democratic states will automatically cooperate, and that will lead to peace in the international system. So starting from there, the liberals trace their origin from there, and then they have given theories like democratic peace. They also have given various important theories on institutions. They have given theory on the cooperation which takes place between the states, the complex interdependence. They have given theory on epistemic communities and all. So they are the ones, they initially the debate in international politics is between there is always a debate between liberals and the realists, and they try to explain, they try to argue against each other, and that's a very interesting and very lively debate which is there right since the early part of the 20th century, 1930s and onwards. The debate is there, and the debate, there is no final conclusive evidence to say that one theory is better than the other. And if somebody tells you that how do you know that which theory is more useful for international politics? So my argument here would be that there are various theories which explain the various aspects of international politics. For instance, as I told you, realism would focus on power and hierarchy in the international system, or the structure of the international system. The liberals would focus on the trade or the cooperation or the international organizations in the international system. Then the constructivists who would focus on this identity, norms, values in the international system, and they are very critical of the realist and some parts of liberalism also. Then there is international society approach, which basically combines realism and liberalism, some elements of realism and liberalism, and they argue that the international system actually has both the elements, so there's power as well as the laws in the international systems, and both play important role. So these are the mainstream theories, but also there are critical theories. In critical theory, I would include the radical theories, for instance, the Marxist theories or the dependency theory, which is there in the international system. Then there are also feminist theories, like trying to see the international politics from the feminist perspective. And they believe that the international relation has been by and large dominated by the patriarchal mindset. So they challenge that patriarchal mindset through that the feminist arguments. And there are also some of the scholars who try to especially the post-structuralist and the postmodern scholars who try to argue against the broader meta-theoretical narratives in the international system. They argue that how these theories don't explain much, so their focus would be on the issue areas, and they follow a completely different approach. So all these are the broader mainstream, these are the theories in international politics, some mainstream and some critical theories. So if you want to develop a broader understanding of international politics, you should be aware of all these theories. Towards the end of the lecture today, I'll also introduce you to some of the basic texts in the international politics that you should read, just the basic, a few I'll suggest you, and then from those books you can also find out the other readings that you might be interested later. But now I'm coming back to today's subject, which is realism. So realism is again one of the important theories in international politics, probably the most important. If you go to United States, for instance, the theory which is the most dominant is probably the realist theory. And realism is also, there are several parts of realism. The earlier, the classical realist, then you have the traditional realist like Morgenthau, then you have neoliberal like Kenneth Walsh. So even within realism, there are some, with the historical time period, first it started with the classical realism, then it was traditional realism, then it was neorealism. But even now today, there are various types of realism which are argued by the various scholars. Some of them say that that there is offensive realism, there is defensive realism, there are strategic realism. So even within realism, there are a number of varieties, a number of theories which focus on various aspects of of international politics within that broader realist framework. But it's very important to understand what are the basic assumptions of realism. That some of the basic assumptions are common right from the classical realism till neorealism. So what are those basic assumptions? The first basic assumption of realism is that human nature is self-centric. That the interest of the self is the most important for any human being, and there is a desire to dominate. But at the same time, there is a desire also not to be dominated. There is a will, the human will to power, to acquire power, to achieve the powerful position, and human nature is very competitive and conflictual. So the fact that a man would like to dominate the other, but at the same time would not like to be dominated by the, so that leads to and that creates a very conflictual kind of condition in international in the society, where you want to dominate over other, but at the human mindset, the way it works according to the realist definition, that you like to dominate over other, but you would not like to be dominated by other. So that's the feeling that you want to dominate over other, but the other person is not wanting to be dominated by any other person. So that leads to conflict according to realism. So that is one of the basic, the first basic assumptions of realism. Also, please understand that human nature for the realist would be same across the universe, which means that the human beings are the same, which means that if human beings are selfish in one place, human beings are selfish all over the world. So that's what it means when it says human nature is same throughout the world. And the interest of the human beings, they are conflictual and competitive, because you try to achieve power, you try to achieve the material and other material wealth and power. So that becomes conflictual, because every person is trying to do the same thing. And the state. So that was about the human nature. Human nature is basically selfish and self-interested, self-centric, competitive, conflictual, etc. But at the second level, if you go to the level of the state, second level of analysis, at the second level, the state is also conflictual. So some of the scholars, the realist scholars, believe that because states also try to aggrandize power, states also try to achieve or maximize their power through economic wealth, or through military means, or through controlling the population of the neighboring countries. So the states are also conflictual in nature, because every state is trying to maximize power. So that automatically creates a conflictual kind of situation in the international system. And also because the international system is not governed by any sovereign. For the state, you have the sovereign. The state is in the state you have the state has the sovereignty. State has the government, and government has power to collect taxes, has power to punish an individual, has power to redistribute the wealth and all. But the kind of system that you have for a domestic state, that is not available in the international system. So when the states are sovereign and there is no overarching authority over the state, so that creates a conflictual kind of situation. And that is the crux of the argument of Neorealist, who would argue, and as I'll tell you in the discussion today, they argue that international system, because of the international system is anarchical. Anarchical is because there is absence of overarching authority in the international system. In other words, there is an absence of the world government. You have the government of India, you have the government of China, but you do not have the government of in the world. United Nations, for instance, it does not have any power. United Nations has to depend upon the power of the state, and that's the reason the powerful states play a very powerful role in the United Nations as well. But there is no real government at the international level or at the international systemic level. So as a result, states try to maximize power. Every state is trying to maximize power, and in the process, what we see a kind of balancing and rebalancing, a kind of conflict between one state and the other. And many of realists actually define war through this motive of the state to acquire power. So the basic assumptions of realism, as I told you, is about the human nature, which is self-centered, which is conflictual, competitive, etc. Then human nature is the same throughout the world. Then the human interest conflict over the issues that I told you. Second, at the level of state is also conflictual because they try to maximize power. And third aspect of this basic assumption of any realist would be that in the international system, because of the absence of government, there is an anarchical kind of situation. So these are the basic assumptions of realism, and most of the realist scholars would adhere to these assumptions of realism. So with this understanding, I'll move to various phases of realism and the various thinkers who are there who can be classified within this category of what you call realism. So the three classical realists would be Thucydides. Thucydides, as you know, that he was a Greek scholar, and he wrote on Peloponnesian War in the Greek city-states. So Thucydides was the first scholar from where the concept of realism is traced. The second is Machiavelli. Machiavelli, as you know, he was Italian Renaissance scholar. So, and he wrote the famous book on The Prince, and where he says that how a king should behave like a lion and a fox, or a ruler should have the properties or the qualities of lion, which means power, as well as a fox, which means cunningness. So that is that is the core argument of realism. And third, again, the Hobbes, who wrote on the social contract theory and all, and he tried to argue that how human nature is basically, the famous phrase or the quotation, human nature is nasty, poor, brutish, selfish. So I'll briefly explain some of the arguments of these scholars, and then I'll move to the contemporary scholars. And in the contemporary scholars, I'll discuss three scholars in today's discussion. One would be Morgenthau, second would be Schelling, and third would be Kenneth Waltz. So realism, strategic realism, and neorealism of the respective theories given by these scholars. So that we'll discuss in today's, and then finally towards the end I'll also give you some of the critiques of realism. So I'll start with this classical realist, Thucydides. He wrote about the Greek city-states and the conflicts which were taking place in the Greek city-states. I'm talking of 4th, 5th century BC. And what he observed that the great powers like Athens, Sparta, and they were the powerful Greek city-states. So when and there was a Persian empire which was again very powerful, and please remember that I'm talking of a period when there was no Islam, and Persian empire was not an Islamic state of that period. I'm talking of the 4th, 5th century BC. So in that period, what is happening that Greek states are fighting among themselves to acquire power. They're capturing other states. They're constantly fighting against the Persian Empire. What was happening that the Greek states formed a Peloponnesian alliance against the Persian Empire. But as soon as they emerged victorious in that war against Persian Empire, the alliance collapsed, and they started fighting among themselves. And the powerful state was of the Greek city-state. Powerful states were the Athens was very powerful state. Then Sparta was another powerful state which was there in the Greek city-state. And he argued that from those observations, Thucydides argued how the states are trying to maximize power, how states are it's very difficult to have a long-term cooperation between the states, and the states cooperate only when there is some kind of threat, external threat. The Greek city-states cooperated against Persian Empire, but as soon as they emerged victorious, the alliance collapsed and they started fighting among themselves. So that led to a kind of understanding of Thucydides, who argued that how by very nature the states are conflictual. So that is taken as one of the he is taken as one of the forefathers of the theories of or the philosophy of realism. And he also argued that you should stand up to your rival. You should stand up to your rival who is equal, but you should have deference for the rival who is superior to you. So basically, he's trying to argue that if the other state is equal to you, then you should stand up to that competitor. But if other state is very powerful, then deference is the best method. Deference or respect to that country, respect to the state is the best method to deal with that state. So basically, he's trying to argue in terms of the basic realist assumptions, what we consider realism today. So he's trying to argue from that perspective. The next important scholar, the Machiavelli. Machiavelli was the scholar of the Renaissance period, Italian, and as I told you that he said that the state or the rulers should have both the elements of this power and the cunningness. Power, he used the metaphor of lion and fox. A lion is kind of a lion represented the power of the state, and fox represented the cunningness of the state. So a ruler has to be powerful as well as cunning, because he argued that a state has to be ruthless in its pursuit of self-interest, and ruler must be like a fox. He also argued that there should be a difference between private morality and political morality. So what is considered to be essential for the private morality, for instance honesty, for instance truthfulness, the respecting all the human beings, not hurting the sentiments, or not hurting physically any other person. So these are the parts of private morality. But this kind of private morality cannot be applied to the for the state, or the rulers cannot have this kind of morality. For instance, there can be times when rulers need to punish the enemy for the larger good, of course. And the state has to punish the criminals. A state has to take a very harsh action for the protection of interest of the state. So when the war is taking place, you cannot have the Christian philosophy or a kind of non-violent philosophy of a state cannot fight the war. So that is not possible. So what Machiavelli is trying to argue here is that there is a difference between the private morality and the state's morality, or the morality of a private individual and the morality of the ruler. So the ruler should be guided by the national interest. National interest or the freedom of the state is the supreme motive, and it might require at times sacrifices of the individual from maybe from the own state, because when there are wars, number of the military personnel are killed, but that is for the protection of the state. Basically, the argument here is that for the protection of the larger good, or for the protection of society, some of the people have to be sacrificed by the state. So the argument here is that the private morality of the individual will not apply to to the morality of the state or the morality of the ruler. So they are guided by different morality. The morality of the state or the ruler is to make the state powerful, is to maximize the power, to behave in a very diplomatic way, but at the same time it has to be assertive and very powerful in its dealing with the enemies in the other state. So these are some of the values that a state and the ruler that they need to follow. So so that is the difference between the private and the private morality and morality of the state and the ruler. So these are some of the arguments that Machiavelli is making in the famous book The Prince, and that again is taken as a very as one of the most important classical texts of realism. In fact, if I have to give you the one example of Indian philosopher, so Kautilya's mandala theory, for instance, where he's saying that where he's basically trying to explain that how a state should behave with the other state. So how then he argues how this the enemy's enemy, if there are three states and one state is fighting with the other state, so if the other state is fighting with the third state, so the third state becomes the friend of the first state. So enemy's enemy become the friend of the state. So there also in Kautilya in his Arthashastra, he is also giving some of the realist arguments, and he's taken as one of the although there are very few scholars who have studied Kautilya from that perspective, but now Indian scholars try to argue that how Kautilya's Arthashastra can be taken as a text of realism from Indian perspective. So he also says that how a state or the ruler has to be powerful. How the Mauryan ruler, for instance, he says Chandragupta Maurya, how a ruler should behave in a war, and how he has to be very powerful and diplomatic in dealing with the other states. So those are some of the elements of realism which we find in even the Indian text of Arthashastra by Kautilya. And if I come to the fourth philosopher, this Hobbes. So Hobbes, as you know, that he tried to define the human nature, and he said that human nature is shellfish, nasty, poor, brutish, short, etc. So basically, he is trying to say that in the state of nature, there is a permanent state of war between one man and the other. So there is every man is fighting against every other man. So that is the state of nature. For in that situation, it becomes very difficult for any person to survive. For survival, the individuals cooperate, or the human beings cooperate, and they cooperate to create a sovereign state for the survival and protection. But this also creates a kind of security dilemma among the states, because if one state is cooperating with other state, and the other state is also cooperating with some other state, so there can be a situation where the one state's interest is clashing with the interest of other state. So human nature conflictual according to Hobbes, state because sovereign, but one sovereign is also against the other sovereign, so that state also becomes conflictual. But according to Hobbes, the peace can be established within the framework of the sovereign state. So once the sovereign state is established in a particular society, so the peace can be established for the individuals who are part of that sovereign state. But how do you deal with the states which are not the part of sovereign, or who are the part of other sovereign states? So that situation creates a conflictual kind of situation, and that is how the states come to conflict with each other. So Hobbes basically but the major focus of Hobbes is on the state of nature, where there is a conflict. Human nature is basically conflictual, and most of the realist arguments which have emerged in the later years, so they have taken from Hobbes. They have borrowed the understanding of human beings from Hobbes or Machiavelli or Thucydides from the classical literature. So these scholars are basically were the part of the classical realist tradition. But now I'll come to Morgenthau. Sometimes Morgenthau is used as the traditional realist or just the realist, or sometimes people also take as contemporary realist. But now Morgenthau's book is almost 50 years old, so he has also become a part of kind of traditional realism. Morgenthau wrote a very famous book in 1960, and the book is Politics Among Nations. And here he defined politics is a struggle for power over men, and whatever its ultimate aim may be, power is its immediate goal, and the modes of acquiring, maintaining, and demonstrating it determine the technique of political action. So, the basic argument here in the book called Politics Among Nations, Politics Among States, is how politics is struggle for power, and in the process, the political action is nothing but it's a mode of acquiring and maintaining or demonstrating the power. So that is how he defines politics, and for him, politics, whether it's politics at the level of state or international politics, he defines politics in the same way for the state politics as well as international politics. So he argues that how the international politics is also basically a struggle for power, and how the states in the international system, how they try to maximize power, or how in the pursuit of the national interest they come in conflict with the other states. So that's the basic argument of this Morgenthau in Politics Among Nations. There are 6 very famous principles of Morgenthau. There are 6 very famous tenets of that were given by Morgenthau. The first principle of Morgenthau, and you should be knowing these 6 principles, because it's possible that you encounter in one of the examinations or other places this question can be asked: what are the 6 principles of Morgenthau? So one is the unchanging human nature, which is selfish, and that is something which is permanent. So human nature is selfish. That's the first principle according to Morgenthau. Second, he argues that politics is autonomous sphere of action and cannot be reduced to economics or morals. So what he argues, that for instance, in Marxism, the politics is considered to be subordinate to the economic determinants. But according to Morgenthau, politics is autonomous sphere, and politics cannot be reduced to the level of economics or morals. And third, the self-interest, security, and survival. These are the basic human conditions, and they cannot be changed. Interest of human beings change over time, but the self-interest, security, and survival, these are the basic tenets, and they remain permanent for the human beings. Fourth principle of Morgenthau is that ethics of IR is a situational ethics, and it is different from private morality. I've explained you the difference between private and the state's morality. So ethics of IR, ethics of international relation, is situational. That ethics which something can be important for a particular country may not be important for, or considered ethical for one state may not be considered ethical for the other state. Fifth principle of Morgenthau is that realists are opposed to the ideal of imposing ideology over the other. The realist, the realist assumption is that you cannot impose the ideology of one state over the other, because that will lead to conflict. And the sixth principle of Morgenthau is that the statecraft should be aware of the limitations and imperfections of human beings. So these are the basic 6 principles of Morgenthau. And here, one important that you should know that he argues that ideology of the one state cannot be imposed over the other state. Since there, and some of the countries, for instance, and they try to export democracy to the other state, especially United States and the other Western countries, they think that the promotion of democracy is essential for the establishment of peace in the international system. But for realism, especially for a scholar like Morgenthau, this should not happen, because this will lead to a kind of conflict. That if one state tries to impose the ideology of the other state, if one state tries to impose its ideology on the other state, so that will lead to conflict between the 2 states. So if I have to give you the example, you can understand the Republican Party, and which is much more realist in in terms of the pursuit of their policies, and the Liberal Party of this in the United States. The Republicans, they never try to they don't believe in exporting the democracy, or there's an understanding that exporting democracy is not the right way of establishing the peace in the international system. But there are other scholars or the entire the liberals, the liberals in the United States will argue that the peace in the international system can be established only through the promotion of democracy in other states. So the additional conflict also reflect in the real power politics which real power politics which occurs in among the political parties in the United States. Now, with this background of Morgenthau, I'll take you to the second realist scholar and his Schelling, and he gave the concept of strategic realism here, where he argued that realism of Schelling was influenced by behavioralism. I'll talk about behavioralism later in the lecture, not today, but probably in some of the other lectures when we talk about the methods. But here you understand that the basic idea here was to make the theories of international politics or discipline of international politics very similar to the discipline of natural science, for instance. So they wanted to eliminate subjectivity from international politics and international relations, from the discipline of international relations, so that they can achieve so-called quote-unquote objectivity in international relations. So they were the Schelling's arguments were devoid of any normative analysis of world politics, and according to him, there was an absence of subjectivity and values. So if you have subjectivity and value in the international system, so the real objectivity as you have in the science, that cannot be achieved according to Schelling. So that's how he's following the behavioralist model. He's trying to follow the behavioralist method in international relation, basically to achieve so-called objectivity in international relations. Although this attempt is not very successful, and please understand that subjectivity cannot be completely eliminated from subjects like international politics or sociology or history, because they are integral part of it. And objectivity here does not mean that you have to eliminate all the subjectivity. It simply means that you should be aware of the kind of values and the normative structure that you are using to understand the politics of international system. So, but the attempt here by Schelling and other behavioralist scholar, the attempt here was to eliminate subjectivity and value from the international system. Although that was not quite successful, and that will not happen that can never happen in the social sciences. But the important contribution of Schelling was that he tried to understand the diplomacy. He tried to understand that how the leaders of the state, how the state leaders think strategically in policy making, and how they are not burdened by the morality of the morality of the individuals. Again, he uses the game theory in analyzing the foreign policy behavior of the state, and he argued that how diplomacy is nothing but the bargaining between the two states and bargaining between the leaders. Threat is an important element of foreign policy according to Schelling, and coercion is again a method that through which you bring the adversary to the bargaining table. So the strategic realism basically of Schelling, he tries to understand the foreign policy making, the decision making in the foreign policy. There he tries to his contribution is that he took into account the leadership, that how certain leaders would behave in a certain way. Although he believes that the leaders will decide according to the best interest available or best option available at that particular point of time in the process of bargaining, but the fact that he took the behavior of the leaders into account while explaining international politics, so that is an important contribution of Schelling in international politics. And because Morgenthau, as I told you, that his basic assumption starts from the human nature, and at the best, he takes into account the state as a unitary actor. But here the Schelling is also taking into account the behavior of the leaders. So that is important contribution of Schelling in international politics, and he's a realist scholar, as I told you in the beginning. Now I'm coming to Neorealism, and the person who is considered to be the most important is, of course, Kenneth Waltz. Kenneth Waltz, he gave the theory of international politics in 1979. Here, as I told you that he tried to give a systemic and a structural analysis of international politics. Morgenthau, as I told you, that he's trying to explain. He's trying to explain in terms of human nature, that how human nature is conflictual, and that leads to the aggregate interest of the human leads to the aggregate interest of the state, and that leads to conflict. But here the level of analysis is changing. For Kenneth Waltz, the level of analysis was not human nature. Level of analysis was also not the state. Kenneth Waltz is talking of the international system, the system which is not visible. The system which exists but which is not clearly which cannot be seen. The way you can see the parameters of the state, but you cannot see the parameters of the international system. So according to Kenneth Waltz, the international system is anarchical, and what he means by anarchy is that that, as I told you, that there is no world government. There is an absence of the world government. So as a result, when in that kind of situation, when there is a hierarchy of power in the international system, where every state is not equal, where one state is more powerful than the other state. Some of the states are very powerful, some of the states are very weak. So, and there is no world government to govern these states. So that leads to conflict. And when every state is trying to maximize its power, to enhance its power in the international system, so there is a hierarchy in the international system. And that hierarchy is there's a relative power distribution in the international system. So, and every country is trying to upgrade its status in that international hierarchy, and that leads to conflict in the international system. So that is the main argument of Kenneth Waltz, who was this neo-realist scholar in the international politics, and his book is considered to be one of the classics in the international. In the literature in international politics. He also argued, Kenneth Waltz's arguments were basically influenced by the discipline of economics. If you read the book Theory of International Politics, most of his arguments, they're influenced by the arguments of economics. That in economics, for instance, the way market operates, the market is not visible. The way market operates in the market determine the supply, demand, etc. And market, a market also tries to establish the equilibrium in terms of the setting of the prices. So similarly, that idea, that basic assumptions of economics, that influenced the ideas of Kenneth Waltz when he tried to understand the theories of realist theory of international politics. So that was the major contribution of Kenneth Waltz in international politics. And he also argued that the balance in the international system can be established by polarity or multipolarity, and he said that is the balance in the system can be established in bipolar kind of system where you have only two countries, and basically he is taking the example of the Cold War period, and he argues that how the period before the World War I or before the World War II, how there are multiple powers, or how there was a kind of multipolarity in the international system. So according to Kenneth Waltz, that multipolarity that created a conflictual situation, and that led to two wars, World War I and World War II. But after that, after the World War II, the world that we see today, the world that we see during the Cold War period, so that Cold War period was by and large the peaceful, because there are small skirmishes in the periphery, but the major war did not take place between the two powers. So he argues, along with some other scholars, they argue that the states try to, the superpowers, the international politics is defined by the great powers, and great powers try to create an equilibrium in the system. And in the Cold War period, that equilibrium was established by the two countries, United States and its alliances on the one hand, and the Soviet Union and its alliances on the other hand. And by that logic, if you go, if you extend that logic further to the post-Cold War period, so that would mean that if the bipolarity, now as you know that bipolarity is over, so now there is a new kind of situation emerging, and the world in the 1990s, it appeared that the world was unipolar, but in after that, in the new century, it appears that world is moving towards multipolar. So for Kenneth Waltz, this will create a conflictual kind of situation where US is one power, but at the same time there are other emerging countries which are emerging powerful, and so the status quo power, the United States, is being challenged by countries like China and China as the major country which is challenging the status quo. So China becomes the revisionist power. So according to the realist argument, that the equilibrium which is destabilized by the emerging powers, so that creates a situation of conflict. They defined the World War, for instance, the World War II, the realists would define that UK was the most powerful country in that period, but UK supremacy was being challenged by countries like Germany and Japan, and those countries challenged the power of England, and that led to a kind of conflict which resulted in the World War II that you see. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is how they try to explain the war and the balance of power and the stability of power, and how destabilization might lead to conflict in the international politics. So and again, if you want to read on balance of power, the Organsky, Kugler, and there are a number of other, Mersheimer, the other scholars that you can read, and you can consult some of the books of these scholars. So but now I'll give you some brief, because I've been discussing about this various theories of realism. I should also tell you what are some of the important books that you should consult for this for understanding the theories of international politics. So and there are certain critiques also, but I'll gradually when I talk about those theories in the future classes, future courses, future lectures. So I'll talk about constructivism. I'll also talk about critical theory and liberalism, and all these theories are critical of the realist theory. But today I must I'll let you know some of the books which are very useful for you. And first book is by Morgenthau, which is Politics Among Nations. That book came in 1960. So that is considered as one of the classics in the international politics, especially his book is considered the father of realism in contemporary times. So that book you should read. The second is Kenneth Waltz, who gave this theory of international politics. It's published by McGraw-Hill in 1979. So that's second important book. For constructivism, you should read the book by Alexander Wendt, and he gave a theory of this social theory of international politics. This book gives you a good background of realism, but it also critiques realism, and it tries to argue or tries to understand international politics from a constructivist perspective. This is a new theory which is just 20 years old. This book, as you can see, this book came in 1999, although an article of Alexander Wendt came earlier, but basically the constructivism emerged as an important theory in 1990s. So you should read that. Alexander Wendt is a beautiful book, and this will clarify your understanding of realism as well as constructivism. Then for liberal, you should read the book by Cohen and Nye, and the name of the book is Transnational Relations and World Politics. The next is Kurochwil, and this again written from the constructivist perspective. So Kurochwil, and his book is Rules, Norms and Decisions. It came out in 1989 from Cambridge University Press. And finally, you should also read a textbook. All these are the classical authors, but I would recommend you to read a textbook which has been published in 2003 by Oxford University Press. And the name of the book is by Jackson and Sorensen. These are the two authors. And the name of the book is Introduction to International Relations, Theories and Approaches. So these are the two books. These are the books that you should consult for international relations. Thank you, and I hope you liked the lecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that lucid, clear presentation for our students and friends. That was our lecture for today. But we have more to follow in this series, so stay tuned in for that. And thank you for watching us. Have a great day.